What is up, gamers? Today I will be bringing you guys my Dragonic Overlord the Rebirth deck profile. So first, V starter, it's a V deck, so yeah. Then we will go Dragonic Overlord the Rebirth. He has 3 auto Vanguard skills. At the beginning of your battle phase, if you have one or more rear guards, you can lock all of your rear guards. At the end of the first battle he attacked this turn, you Counterblast one, discard one, and restand him. Whenever he attacks a Vanguard, you can Soul Blast one, and for every 2 of your locked cards, you retire one of your opponent's rear guards. So if you have a full locked field of 5 units, you retire 2 rear guards. And then once per turn at the end of the battle that he attacked, if you have 4 more damage and 5 or more locked cards, you can discard 2 cards and restand them and get a force marker. The minimum, if you just do his first skill and you lock 1 rear guard, then he will be base 23 from the force marker. He will swing, twin drive, end of battle, Counterblast 1, discard 1, restand, and then swing again, twin drive again. So you end up getting, instead of a twin drive, a quad drive, and you only discard 1 card. So you get 3 new cards in your hand by the end of the turn. He can also just keep blowing up the opponent's field through his retire effect. So during late game scenarios where you have a full locked field, you will retire 2 rear guards every time he attacks. And then in late game scenarios, he will be attacking 3 times because of his last skill restanding him. And you always go Force 1 in this deck, just naturally, because Rebirth is one of the few Kagero cards that can actually generate force markers. Because of him not losing drive checks, he will just naturally just check more cards than the other Overlords will. The last skill is a late game skill where you discard 2 to restand him and get a force marker. In Kagero, it is one of the few clans that doesn't generate markers. The only other card that does is Seal Dragon Blockade. I like Blockade, but the card ain't that good. Rebirth, being able to generate force markers is pretty alright. The only bad part is it doesn't happen till late in the game. So you really don't get as much value out of it as other clans. So like Percival giving you an Excel marker on turn 3. Pretty good. Why this is good though is, let's say on your first grade 3 ride, you have all the conditions met, 4 damage, 5 locked cards, and you got a Force 1 marker, then Rebirth will swing 3 times. He will go 23, twin drive, restand, 23, twin drive, restand, 33 from the force marker, twin drive, and that's it. And then each time you attack, you can Soul Blast 1 and retire 2 rear guards. So he basically just gives you a really strong finisher in Kagero. In V Premium at least, they have lacked. In Premium, the only other strong finisher they have is the Legion. And this is basically a Legion without needing an Overlord and Soul and a small hand, and instead you need 4 more damage and a locked field. So there's a bunch of ways you can combine this in Kagero. In V Premium specifically, you can play it with Lawkeeper, because Lawkeeper already requires you to have a field, so Rebirth just naturally fits in there as a finishing play. You can put it in normal Overlord. You can do a pure build of just Rebirth. And what we're doing in this deck is for Dauntless Drive Dragon. So Dauntless, at the end of the battle that your drive check revealed 2 or more normal units, give one of your front row rear guards plus 10k for turn. And at the end of the battle he attacks, if you have 4 more cards in hand, you can discard 3 and restand them, and whenever something rides over Dauntless, they get Dauntless's skills. So this is really nice because combined with the Rebirth, what happens is you ride Rebirth over Dauntless, Rebirth naturally has 3 attacks himself, and then Dauntless gives him a 4th one. What you would typically go in this case is you'd have 2 Force 1 markers. So you'd be 33, restand, 33, restand, and then you get a force marker from that restand and go 43, restand, 43. So if the opponent has a high damage count or a low hand count, then this can very easily just kill the opponent and just end the game right there. So that is the basis of this deck, is to pull off that play and win the game off it. So some cards that help out with that is Toward Cannon Dragon. Vanguard Rearguard, once per turn, Counterblast 1, put a normal unit from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck. Choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or less rearguards, retire it, and then if you have 4 or less cards in your hand, draw a card. The big thing with Rebirth is you have to a full field to be able to lock to get that third attack off him. So a lot of the cards in this deck are cards that replace themselves either as act skills or on-play skills. Toward Cannon is one of those ways to do that. And Toward Cannon rewards you for playing down your hand and calling things because of the extra draw skill it can get. And then in the process, you're also blowing up the opponent's board. Another card like Toward Cannon is Dragon Dancer Frima. So if your opponent has 1 or less rearguards, it gets boost. And when placed during your turn, if you have 2 or more grade 3 units, not rearguards, units, so it counts your Vanguard, Soul Blast 1, retire all of your opponent's rearguards in her column. And if you retired 1 or less, you draw a card. So what you typically do with this is, with how many grade 3s are in this build, we are typically kind of flooded with it. And we can slam them down as lock fodder for the Rebirth, or discard fodder for Rebirth or Dauntless. So if we call an extra one down, then Frima becomes live, and we can start either blowing up full columns or blowing up a rearguard and drawing a card for just a Soul Blast, which is very valuable. The boost effect doesn't come in that clutch other than with your Dauntless turn, because typically on your turn 3, you will go into Dauntless and try to push the opponent as hard as possible to either make them low in hand or high at a high damage count. Frima just fits naturally in here, and since it can get boost, it will put the Dauntless at 33k on the first swing. So yeah, very natural inclusion in here. A kind of weird one is for Break Breath Dragon. So at the end of battle, it attacks. If your opponent's rearguard is retired this turn, you can retire Break Breath and draw a card. And when rode upon, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. And if you didn't retire anything, draw a card. So Break Breath is really nice because of the when rode upon skill. You get to punish people for playing aggressively against you by either blowing up their things, or if they aren't playing aggressively, you still get the draw, and the Break Breath ends up replacing itself anyway. The first skill is like a bit of a weird one, because it's an end of battle skill, but Rebirth locks your field at the start of battle phase. So if Rebirth is your Vanguard, you do not get this skill. The good thing about Break Breath though, it is a very, very anti-aggro type of card. So if you have a Dauntless turn, you want to use Dauntless as a way to fix your hand and push for damage. And Break Breath helps a lot with this mindset. So if you're on Dauntless and you call the Break Breath, and you can slam anything down as something to retire with, and then retire an opponent's rearguard, and then have Dauntless like do its big attack, restand, big attack, and then usually this will probably be at 30k afterwards because of the boost from Dauntless and your drive checks. And then this will swing, and then since you retired something that turn, Break Breath dies and you draw a card. So it basically just lets you play aggressively while not minusing your hand at all, or potentially minusing your field by not giving your opponent a chance to kill your units afterwards. It just helps you dig deeper into your deck to find specific things you might need. Moving on to grade 1s, we have 4 Dragonic He-Shat. So, unplaced on rearguard, you counterblast 1, soul blast 1, draw a card, and then retire a back row rearguard. And then whenever you ride on top of He-Shat, you get to add a grade 3 from the top 5, and then shuffle. So, this is kind of the same mindset as Break Breath. So these are really nice in here because the when rode upon skills. And one of the things we need with Rebirth is cards. So with this idea in mind, you ride He-Shat, and then you ride Break Breath over it, and then you do He-Shat skill, search top 5, and add something. We'll say we'll add Dauntless. And then on the next turn, ride Dauntless over the Break Breath. And then if the opponent didn't call anything, you draw 1. Just from riding up, you -1 for riding, but then you +1 right back because they give you cards back. And if they happen to call things, then your opponent loses value off that rearguard because it dies from Break Breath. And then you gain access to the other Break Breaths in your hand, and so on and so forth. So He-Shat just runs off the same idea, and because his first skill also draws you a card, he is like Femma and Tord Cannon, where whenever you play it, you draw a card, and then it's like you didn't lose anything. You got a +1 out of it. And all of these cards are also minusing your opponent also. So it just gives you enough of an advantage engine to be able to stay in the game and consistently be able to get the 5 locked for Rebirth. Next, for ammo, we have Rebirth, we have He-Shat, and we have Tord Cannon. So all of these are semi-counter blast intensive cards because we want to keep using them non-stop, so ammo lets us refund those skills. It's also an 11k booster, so behind a Dauntless Vanguard, it will be 34 total. Whenever your opponent's rearguard is retired during your turn, you can retire him and draw a card and countercharge 1. So this kind of has the same aspect as Break Breath. So one cool play you can do, either early in the game or grade 3 turn, you can make a column of Break Breath and ammo, have this swing at a rearguard, and then if they let the attack through, then ammo would activate first because it's as soon as that unit's retired, and then you retire ammo, countercharge 1, draw 1, and then at the end of the battle you'll do Break Breath, retire it, and draw 1. So you basically get aggression while not leaving your board vulnerable, and it just lets you dig deeper into your deck to find the things you need. Next, 3 Lava Flow. We are really wanting to go Dauntless into Rebirth. We have to be able to find those cards, and Lava Flow just makes that process easier. And the 13k boost, on the Rebirth turn it doesn't matter, because you're locking your field anyway, but early game you want to put pressure on the opponent to be able to get them at a higher damage count. So this being a 13k booster pretty easily, combined with Dauntless, you can have this swing for 36k by itself, and then restand and then swing again, or behind like one of our grade 2s. This can be a 23k column, which is a very nice number. And then if we end up getting a 10k boost to one of them from Dauntless skill or a trigger, then that will make it 33k. And then it will just be a really awkward number to guard by making them guard with a 15 and a 10 or a 20 and a 5. Or sometimes they have to guard with more afterwards. So yeah, Lava Flow is just a nice consistency booster to the deck. And then the spicy option, this is the most flexible spot in the deck. You can put really anything here. Right now I have 2 Calamity Tower Wyvern. So sometimes the 4 restand on, or the 4 attacks on Rebirth isn't enough to be able to win the game with. So Calamity adding 15k to the turn is very, very nice. Typically, if you did Rebirth over Dauntless, then how this would look would go 33, 33, 43, 43. But if you do Calamity at the start of the turn, it turns into 48, 48, 58, 58, not counting any triggers. So Calamity gets basically 4 times the value in this particular instance because Rebirth is swinging 4 times. You basically just get an extra 60k power out of nowhere, which is very nice. Now, the main, like, bad part about Calamity is if you want to use it, it retires itself, so you basically neg 1 for that huge power boost. So in some scenarios, you might not have enough cards in hand to be able to consistently do this. So that's why we have so many cards in the deck that replace themselves, so then Calamity can go off a bit more consistently. That's it for the non-triggers. Now, other options you can play in the deck, Doha and Geron. So, we want a full field for Rebirth. You call down Doha, you do Doha skill, call Geron. And then you have a free unit off it, which is pretty nice. The other skills themselves aren't actually that bad. Doha, whenever it attacks and the opponent has no rear guards, they can't guard with normal units on his attack, so they're forced to block with triggers. And then Geron, if they don't have a field, gets plus 5k. So this turns into a 22k column, which is a magic number into Excel and Protect matchups. And then they have to block with a trigger. And then combined with Dauntless, you can make it even bigger, pretty consistently. This will very easily just hit like a truck. And then Geron's on hit is actually very valuable in this deck. So whenever it boosts Doha and hits, you can Counter Blast one, draw one, Soul Charge one. So this is very nice because naturally we want to have more cards in our hand, which Geron gives us a draw. We don't use as much Counter Blast in here. It's really just He-Shat and Tord Cannon as our main Counter Blasters, and then Rebirth on our final turn needs one Counter Blast. And then ammo helps refund some of that anyway. So Geron can utilize some of that extra Counter Blast for this. And then the Soul Charge, we have a lot of Soul Blasting in this deck between Rebirth, Calamity, and Frima. So the Soul Charge can come up. So very nice. It just takes up a lot of deck space that you could be running other things with. But that's really up to you if it's worth it or not. Next, Dragonic Nasser. Nasser's interesting. So when placed, if your Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, Soul Blast 1, check top 7, call a grade 3, and then shuffle the rest. Kind of works like Doha and Geron, but instead of a Counter Blast, it's a Soul Blast, and you call just a random grade 3 from your top 7. This helps make Frima a bit more consistent if you're having issues with Frima. It also pulls out dead grade 3s in your deck because you only need to see one Dauntless and one Rebirth. So it converts them into a rearguard that, if boosted by ammo or lava flow, would hit a really big number, but if it was boosted by Nasser, it'd be 21. And then it converts it into lock fodder for Rebirth. The main issue with this is that the things you usually call aren't really that good. They're just vanillas, which is fine if you're trying to go for a Rebirth lock, but in the earlier turns, it's not as good. And then the call isn't consistent. You won't always get that call. Sometimes you'll hit a heal in there, and you could call it, but you also could not. It's really up to you. The fact that this isn't a guarantee makes it not as good. Next, Sabel. Very much like an ammo. So on Vanguard, on hit, draw a card. Pretty solid. It helps with the game plan of making the opponent have to lose cards earlier on, or they just take damage early on and then you plus off it. Whenever your opponent's rear guard is retired during your turn, you can retire Sabel and draw a card. So if you're having matchups where they're constantly trying to clear your field or abuse your field, so like Glendio is trying to lock your field down, or like any retire decks, then Sabel is very nice on being able to clear your field up a bit and then try to keep up in card advantage. And it also is just like another ammo where you just dig through your deck faster. And then the spiciest option, Seal Dragon Kersey. Not many people really consider this card or know what it even does. On play, Vanguard or Rearguard, you can Soul Blast one, discard a card, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. Your opponent chooses up to one grade 2 unit from their hand and calls it to an open rearguard. That unit's auto abilities don't activate. And if they did not call, you draw 2. So why is this good? So the is optional. The opponent does not have to do it. So let's say on turn 1, you ride Kersey. Draw off your starter, and then you Soul Blast, discard a card. And you don't have to retire something to get the rest of the effect. So since they have nothing in play, you just make them call a grade 2. And in a lot of cases, they will have just one grade 2 in hand. That will be their ride target. They can either call it down to deny your draw 2, or what most people will do is be fine with it, and you just draw 2 cards off it. So you Soul Blast 1, ditch 1, and then draw 2. So if they have an extra one and then they do call it, that is fine because we are playing Kagero. We retire things just naturally as part of our game plan. Even if a lot of these cards didn't have a retire part on it, we'd probably still run it because they say draw a card. Kersey being able to just force the opponent to drop a grade 2, using our retire effects to retire that grade 2 and making them lose just random resources for no reason, is very nice. On our Rebirth turn, this also can come in clutch. So you just drop down Cursey, retire something. If they call something down, and they're like, oh, it's a grade 2, I can intercept with it. Rebirth will lock your field and retire 2 things on attack anyway. So you swing and pop the thing they called and something else, and then it's like they basically discarded a card, is what happened. And in that scenario, Cursey is a discard for a discard, but you keep Cursey in play. And you retire something else. So you really +1 over the opponent in this scenario. So yeah, that's why Cursey can be good, and I think it should be considered more in Congo decks. So 4 triggers, 4 draw PG, and then 8 crit. Why like this? So I'll go over the draw PGs first. So for draw PGs, we need to keep our hand semi-healthy for Rebirth to consistently go off. And if we ran Critinals in here, it'd raise the ceiling of Rebirth, but we also end up just dying to things like Astral Poets, where they just slam you with Valkyrion multiple times. And it makes our game plan just a little bit less stable because we lose out on draw triggers. And since we're a kind of piece-reliant deck, we don't need specific pieces, we just need really anything. Draw triggers are just even better in that scenario because it just keeps our hand healthy. The 8 crit is in here because for Rebirth, Rebirth's biggest problem is that he does not gain any crit or power himself. The only time he gains power is through getting Force 1 markers from his last skill. By that point, it's like you don't get as much value out of it. So the main issue is he doesn't gain crit. So having as many crits as possible in the deck does help this a lot in being able to just, if you hit a crit early on your Dauntless Rebirth combo, then it just makes the turn so much more scarier because then every attack can potentially hit them for 2 or more damage. Even then, even towards the later part of the combo on like attack 3 or 4, you still gained a bunch of power through the Force 1 markers and potentially other triggers in the deck. That hitting a crit then is still very good. So you just need crits to be able to close out games as much as possible. And then the last part for Heal Guardian. So Heal Guardians are very nice in here. First, I want to talk about the normal heals, the 20k shield ones. Those ones are still good in here because you get rewarded for being at 4 more damage by having Rebirth be able to get the second restand. And in the later stages of the game, 20k shield is like a very nice number. So like if the Gurgurit player has 3 Excel markers in play, the whole board everything they call gets 15k, and the 20k shield just helps guard those numbers easier than a 15k shield would. In those scenarios, it's still fine. I personally like the Heal Guardians right now because a lot of decks right now will just slam you turn 3, and we want to preserve as much of our hand as possible because if we fall down far behind, then we just kind of flop over. So having the heals just make the game more stable early game just helps out a lot. Now, if this wasn't a Dauntless deck, if it was like pure Rebirth, because there is a pure Rebirth build you can do where you basically just try to win through sheer card advantage by playing cards that retire things and constantly getting 2 locked cards, and then swinging for his first restand and getting just naturally more cards in your hand through that, then running the 20k shield heals can be better. But I think in this particular build, since our big combo turn isn't till turn 4, we want to be able to preserve our hand as much as possible as early as possible. So that's why these heals are, I think, better in this current build. And yeah, that is about it. Thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one.